Right, so here's my F1's Constructors Championship prediction for the 2021 season. Okay, so the 2021 F1 season is around the corner, and just like everyone else, I'm going to do my predictions for the Constructors Championship. Starting from the bottom, the team I've put in last place is unfortunately Williams. Though they have strengthened the partnership with Mercedes, I think it'll be another season yet before they really reap the entire benefits of that. But looking back on last season, they grew very well throughout the year. George obviously putting that car in positions that no one expected him to, starting very high up the grid compared to what we all probably would have thought come the start of the season. Though I think they'll get a few point finish this season, I do ultimately think they'll find themselves in last place again, but only by a very narrow margin this year. So moving now on to 9th place, Haas F1 team. Two new drivers, one from F1 from the royalty and the other an absolute cunt. I think they'll struggle for the first few races to hit the ground running, obviously with the lack of experience. I don't expect them to really do anything at all this season. I think we could be surprised and see them in around the 15th to 13th finishes every now and again, but all in all, I don't really expect anything. I think Schumacher will have a good year, and then Mazepin, let's be honest, is he even going to finish the season with an F1 seat? I'd be very surprised to see if he does, but yeah, unfortunately, I think Haas, I think this is a massive step down for them from what they had last year. Obviously, Mick Schumacher's a good addition, but with Mazepin, I think everyone's hoping they just do badly, aren't they? Let's be honest. So in 8th place, I've predicted Alfa Romeo. Obviously, they stuck with the same lineup as last year. Last year, they did round up the last of the benchmarkers. And I think they'll do so again quite comfortably this year. I think next year they'll be under a lot of pressure from Williams, but I think ultimately, for 2021 at least, they're very comfortably in this 8th seat. In 7th, and I think this will surprise a few people, I've actually put Alpine. Obviously, Renault did really well last year, and Daniel Ricciardo did get his 2 podiums. But I just don't really think Ocon is a strong enough driver to really lead a team. I don't really see them advancing their car too much throughout this season, especially considering some of the teams that they're fighting, AlphaTauri, Ferraris, etc. Alonso coming back in will give them, a reliable, quick driver. Although, to be honest, I think we're just happy to see him back in the sport. Though no one in 7th, and I think this will surprise a few people, I've actually put Alpine. Obviously, Renault did really well last year, and Daniel Ricciardo did get those 2 podiums, but I just don't really think Ocon is a strong enough driver to really lead a team, so I don't really see them advancing too much this season, especially when they are fighting the likes of AlphaTauri and Ferrari, for example. Obviously, Alonso is coming back into the mix. I think we're all just happy to see him return to the sport. He's a reliable, he's a quick driver, and I think he's an exciting addition. I'm just hoping he don't go the same way as Seb Vettel and maybe start to overstay his welcome a little bit, kind of ruining his reputation by coming back, but we'll have to see how he does. Personally, I think he will do alright. I don't think we're going to be blown away, but I think he'll just be a very consistent, probably 7th to 13th place finisher a lot of the time. So I think that Alpine will do a fairly decent job and gather a fair amount of points. I ultimately think that the lineup is not as strong as what they possibly need, and I don't think they've done a good enough job in replacing what Danny Rick brought to that team, unfortunately. And I think losing Danny is going to be a massive pain for them. And yeah, I think 7th is where I see them finishing. Up 1 place from last year's actual finish, I've put AlphaTauri. Obviously, Pierre's still there, and after his somewhat shock win last year, he's certainly got a kick in his step to step up again for the next season. Obviously, last year he was nothing short of phenomenal. Personally, for me, he was one of my drivers of the season. Definitely the standout star. No one really expected him to do as well as what he did, I don't think. He was constantly pushing for top 5. And I think it's going to be exactly the same for this coming season. Obviously, AlphaTauri, Red Bull sister team, they're going to have a fairly decent car. Pierre is a phenomenal driver, so he's going to use everything that he can get out of it. This year, obviously joined by Yuki. I don't know much about him, but all I do know is that 3 years ago he was racing in Japanese F4, and now all of a sudden he's already in F1. So one thing I do wonder is if his progression is just too quick, so he's just blasting through these ranks. He's not getting the time that some of the other drivers will have had. Currently, these ranks a bit slower, kind of perfecting their craft a little bit. Obviously, only time will tell. He's obviously a quick driver, or else ultimately he wouldn't be here. Everyone is at least got pace on them. So I think it's a very interesting appointment. I'm not sure if they're going to regret it come the end of the season. Personally, I think they might, but it is at least going to be interesting to see how he competes with the big boys in F1. In 5th position, I've put Ferrari. Dead in the middle. Obviously, they had an absolute shocker, a disaster of a season last year. and I think this is their redemption year. I think they're going to come out swinging. They've got a point to make. They've got a point to prove. Obviously, with this chip on the shoulder of being a laughingstock last season, pretty much, I think they're going to have to really prove themselves. And I think this is a position where Ferrari are going to feel a bit uncomfortable because they are on the back foot. Everyone's already kind of written them off in their own books. So obviously having Carlos coming in, being Charles' second man, I think these two are going to get a very healthy amount of points. Obviously Seb last year, I don't know if it was just his confidence, his support within the team. Obviously something went right. Seb's a brilliant driver and he just wasn't doing what Seb should be doing, realistically, especially when Charles was flying so high. I mean, the points difference between those two in the drivers championship was outrageous. There's no way two teammates should be such stark contrast, in my eyes at least anyway. So hopefully Carlos is going to come in, be able to get out of that car what Charles did last season. But I think that 5th is a very respectable finish for Ferrari this year. I think they could be pushing for 4th at some points, but I think they've got too much of a gap to finish in 4th. But ultimately, they might surprise us, just as they surprised us last year for being so bad. They might surprise us this year for being so great. We'll have to wait and see. I think it's quite an interesting season for them because they do have a lot to prove. And maybe they're going to impress us. Maybe it'll just be a very average performance once again. But I'm hoping for good things. I think as we all are. Everyone in F1, no matter who you actually are supporting, we've got a soft spot for Ferrari. It's Ferrari at the end of the day. 4th. So now getting towards the business end of the leaderboard. I'm sure you can all see this one coming. Aston Martin, the new boys on the grid, on the back of a very good year in the Tracing Point. They've got a solid foundation to build on, even if it's a somewhat should they have that foundation to build on. Nonetheless, they do, so let's move forward. I mean, let's not forget, last year they had a lot of very unlucky DNFs. I remember a handful of times, Omar, the team principal, just head in his hands, just wishing life were different. So, if it weren't for them, a couple of them doing Fs, they could have very easily found themselves in 3rd last year. They were only 7 points behind McLaren, so it's a touch of unluck, but I think over this season they weren't deserving in that 3rd just because of all the controversy that went on around the team. But they did do very fucking well, no matter what you think about the ethics of what they did. That's by the by. Lance Stroll, obviously staying. Of course, he's going to stay. Daddy Stroll's going to pay him. He has shown moments of greatness. It is only in glimpses, and he did prove himself last year that he can be a very good driver. Will he do it again? We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, he did qualify on pole, which you can't take anything away from him. If someone qualified on pole that day, they were the faster man. So, will he be able to do it again? We'll have to wait and see. But I think the big thing that's going to determine Aston Martin's season is Seb Vettel. Is it a good appointment? Personally, I really don't know. I am so on the fence with this one. Obviously, we all know Vettel's past. We all know his history. We all know he's a quick driver. We know he's a good driver. But with this season as disappointing as last year, is it smart for Aston Martin's first year back in F1 to appoint him? I'm not really sure it is. I thought personally they'd want a bit more consistency. I think it's just quite risky in general. Obviously, Vettel could come through good. He could be like, the Vettel we all love and we all know. Or equally, he could just maybe be a bit past it now. He could have a Ferrari season again. And then next thing you know, I think Aston Martin could find himself in 5th or 6th with a performance like Vettel had last year. So, obviously, Vettel does have that little, not chip on his shoulder, but a bit of pep in his step trying to prove himself. He needs to show that last year was because of Ferrari and the situation he found himself in, and not because of actual him as a driver. But the fact that he's now racing in a team who haven't said that they're going to get rid of him before the season even starts, I'm sure he's going to be in a lot better mental space. And I think that's going to affect his performances a lot. So I think we can expect better races. But ultimately, I think Aston Martin are going to come down to a nice edge, and it's whether Stroll and Vettel are going to be a good partnership, and whether either of them can really find some consistent form. Obviously something which both drivers didn't really do last season. So I think 4th is an ambitious target for Aston Martin, but equally is one that they could very much fulfill should the drivers come up to it. In third, I think McLaren will build on the performance from last season and then really establish themselves as the best of the rest. Still not fighting with Mercedes or Red Bull, but I think they will comfortably grab third. And their two drivers will show that they are more than just this meme pair. That I think a lot of people are giving Lando and Danny a lot of disrespect by kind of branding them as this like meme duo. I mean, let's not forget Norris last year, exceptional. I think for me was the young star of the entire league. I thought it was fantastic. I didn't have a bad word to say about him at all. Danny Rick, let's not forget, he was brilliant at Red Bull. He did take a step down for Renault, but he still performed well. I mean, he was still getting podiums, which no one really expected him to. So these two can fucking drive. You know what I mean? Not like Lando's in his third year in F1 now, so he's got a lot of experience behind him. I would say Danny Rick, who has been performing at the top of F1 now for God, how many years? 5 to 10 years. Like, he's been here for a long time. He's an established driver, and I think his experience and longevity in the sport is going to be so good for Lando. Obviously, Lando's still young. And Danny said it in a McLaren YouTube video himself. Like, he's got 9 to 10 years on Lando, so the kind of thing that Danny's gone through and experienced will be similar to what Lando is about to. So I think he's going to be such a big part of Norris's progression this year. I think it's more Danny than it is even the team. I think those two are going to work so well together. Obviously, Danny is not a selfish driver at all, neither is Lando, and I think both of them are going to understand their role in the team very well. I think they're going to bring like the best out of each other kind of thing. And I think they'll both be getting, I'd say, a podium or two each this season. I think they're going to be battling for podiums a lot. I think they're going to be right up there on the 4ths and 5ths. Maybe some races even, I think they could see a front row start, at least one of them, from this next season. I think it's a really promising season for McLaren. Obviously, they did really well last year. Somewhat got lucky with that third place championship finish, but I think they're going to very firmly clasp onto it this year. I don't think that anyone else is really going to be challenging for it. I think they are quite a way ahead of the rest of the midfield teams, and I think it's a very positive year for McLaren. Obviously, third in the Constructors is not a bad finish at all, so good year, great partnership, great new driver they've brought in, and they've got arguably one of the strongest lineups on the entire grid, if you think about it. Right, so now on to the top two positions. Like everyone else, I'm sure we can all agree that Red Bull will finish second in the Constructors this year. Still a little bit behind Mercedes, albeit they did close that gap a hell of a lot towards the back end of last season. I just still think they're a little bit behind in terms of being able to go the full distance with the Merc. Although, you know, they are still an absolute foot above the rest of the grid in my eyes. Looking at the lineup for next year, Max will be Max. He's going to be fantastic. He's going to be the top 3 drivers on the entire grid. We all know this now. It's been the case for a while. But then the second driver, there's been a change. Obviously, bye Alex, I miss you, I love you. I wish it weren't this way, but he's gone. He weren't performing enough. He didn't deserve to get the seat for another year, unfortunately. As much as I wish he was, but in his steps comes Sergio Perez. Surely he's going to thrive in this new seat, or at least we can hope. And you know, as long as he doesn't get that Red Bull driver, second driver curse. Sorry if I've just jinxed it, but as long as they don't get that kind of fog that seems to hang over everyone, it did to Albon, it did to Gasly, I think he's going to smash it. He did very well in his tracing point last year, and now he's moved into a better car with a better team behind him, and I think it could be the sky's the limit with him, really. I think what Perez is going to bring different to the team compared to what Albon would have if they sticked with him was, for example, last year when you had Lewis leading, Max in second and Bottas in third, a lot of the time we'd see Max really pushing Lewis for first, but then Bottas would come right up the rear of Max and kind of force Max to stop being aggressive and defend, which then would ultimately let Hamilton pull away. You know, he weren't getting pushed anymore, so Hamilton could just build up a gap that Max couldn't really do anything about because he had to defend Bottas. And obviously Alex wasn't anywhere near close enough to aid Max in that same way. He couldn't then go and pressure Bottas and release Max to go. But I think what Sergio Perez is going to bring is that he will be right up there at the top of the field with them 3 drivers, and he's going to be Bottas to Max. He's going to be Max's Bottas. He's going to be. We all know he's not the main driver. What he will do is assist that driver tremendously. So he's going to be able to create Max the space he needs to go forth and at least challenge for a win. Obviously, he might not get it. We all know Lewis is always a level ahead above everyone else. But on his off days, I think Max is going to swoop in with the help of Perez and just be phenomenal. I think Bottas is not going to do anything to help Hamilton anymore, get a win by holding off Max. And I think it's a very exciting year for Red Bull. I think they're a little bit too far behind Merckx for this year. But obviously building from last year's end of season where they were phenomenal, carrying all that progression through. Obviously they made some adjustments over summer, albeit a shortened one. I think it's very exciting. I think next year is when we possibly could see a Red Bull Constructors win again, but this year a little bit too soon in my eyes, unfortunately. Right, so now moving on to the top spot, which is no surprise, Mercedes. I think they're going to win the title again, although I don't think it'll be as much as it was last year. Obviously, last year was a record points haul, over 100 points from second, and I don't think it's going to be as wide a gap this year at all. I think it's going to be much closer. I think the fact that Red Bull has strengthened the drivers so much, sorry Albon, I think they're going to be pushed much harder. I think Mercedes are really going to have to show their worth this year and show that they've not kind of rested on the laurels and not took what they have for granted. And this is, of course, if Hamilton ever signs his contract. I think he will, but I think it might be a 1 or 2 year deal. I can't see Lewis sticking around in the sport for much longer. He's achieved everything, he's won everything, he's set every record there is to set. And yeah, I think obviously he said last season that it was more hungry now than ever to win, but ultimately, how motivated can you be once you've won everything? It's something that all sports stars go through at some point if they reach that level of a career, and I think Lewis is at that stage now where he's going to start being tempted by other avenues in life, and I don't blame him for that. But yeah, I just think it's going to be his last season. Maybe he'll have pushed for 2 more, but I'd be surprised. And then their second driver, Valtteri Bottas. Obviously, I think his contract does end of the 2021 season anyway, and I can't see him staying. I think maybe if he had a somehow phenomenal season, he won the Drivers' Championship, maybe he'd stay, but I really don't see it happening. I think he'll come third. I think he's just going to be, do you know what? I've had enough. I'm out. He'll cash his hundreds of millions that he's got in his bank, and he's going to ride off into the, I'm going to sunset, but into the snow with his missus and live a happy life. I mean, he might go into rally full time. Obviously, he does the rally race in Finland. I think it is every year, the winter rally. I don't know what it's called, but he does that. I've seen it on Instagram, and I think he came 6th in that. Which, even in rally, even one of the top 20 drivers in the world in F1 came 6th in rally. So you know what I mean? He's a serial second best, really. He was even when George came in for that weekend. And I think even though the team say Bottas, it doesn't affect him. He's still very confident. It doesn't affect his demeanour. It doesn't affect his race ability, the pressure that he's under. But I think it must do. I mean, if you're constantly being told by the media and by fans that you're not that good, you're not good enough to be pushing Hamilton in that car, then at some point it is going to have an effect on you. And I think we could see it take a big effect on Bottas this year after the whole George Russell saga and people saying that Bottas should get axed and Russell in for this season. I can't see how Bottas could still have the mentality that he's good enough at this point. I think, if you beat something with a stick long enough, it's going to go down. And I think we could see this year. Bottas, I think he's going to have a disappointing 3rd overall. And yeah, I think he'll leave. I think Lewis will as well. And then I think that's really exciting because all of a sudden, the best car on the grid, or so we're all predicting, is going to have 2 empty seats. Obviously, Russell will be the favourite for 1, but then there's a big hole for a potential second driver if one of the Mercs, obviously unless one of the Mercs stays. But I think this is going to be a really big year for Mercedes. I think it's going to be their defining one. It's going to be their big hurrah to these two, and then it's going to be on to a new chapter. But yeah, I think this is the last year where we can comfortably predict Mercedes win. But you never know. I think it's going to be tight at the top. Look, Mercedes should be winning anyway, especially after this 100-point victory they had last season. So this is my predictions for the upcoming season. Let me know what you think down below in the comments, whether you agree or disagree. But either way, I can't wait for this next season. I think it's going to be an absolute thrill. I'm so excited for it. And cheers, everyone. We'll see how we do at end of season.